Guys, when it comes to editing poems, there's so many different ways you can approach it. You can focus on first lines, you can focus on last lines, you can focus on line breaks, you can focus on stanzas, you can focus on the image, you can focus on stakes. That's a ton of different topics, right? So when you're also looking at a poem, another way to view it is to just try to distance yourself, even just physically. And what I mean by that is, even just like holding your poem up from a distance and kind of just seeing, okay, this is what the poem is doing visually. Is that aiding the message that I'm trying to convey in the piece? And so today we're going to be trying that same strategy with the piece. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, guys. This is Fine Print. This is our weekly poetry analysis show. Typically, we're much earlier. We had some family stuff going on just for the Mother's Day holiday. So for those of you celebrating Mother's Day, mothers out there, families out there, happy Mother's Day to you, or belated Mother's Day to you if it's already passed. And what we're going to be doing now is taking a look at a piece by a poet who was kind enough to let us look at their piece as always. So this is Soulmate Within 222. This is a poem that doesn't have a title, at least not one I'm aware of. But we're going to be taking a look at it and kind of just seeing what are some things visually we see going on that may be reinforcing the message or could be opportunities to further reinforce that message. So let's bring the poem up and just do a quick read through. Again, I don't believe it says title. So let's kind of go through. I color red leaves on mahogany trees, so adorned with great vines of red grapes for red wines splashing on maroon roots, crimson grass, garnet fruits, and I still have not shed the last drop of my blood yet. I finger paint wind, swirly passion fruit, skin colored, lips stained rose red with our words left unsaid, healing your deaf and blind, broken heart, draining mine, and I still have not shed the last drop of my love yet. All right, do want to thank again Soulmate Within 222 for allowing us to take a look at your piece. Let's kind of zoom out a little bit and just kind of see. So let's just kind of pay attention. What are some of the things that we notice happening visually? And it's tricky. This was a poem posted on social media, which means that, the formatting may or may not be exactly what we intended. So let's, just for the sake of today's show, let's make the assumption that everything that we see here is as intended in terms of all the line breaks, the line lengths, and things like that. Let's just assume for the sake of this exercise so that way you have an idea of how you can apply this to your own work. Okay. So some things I'm noticing. In general, there's a lot of similarities. It seems like we're pretty balanced in terms of the stanzas. I'm seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Is that 10? Am I kind of right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we're 10 and 10, perfectly split. So what does already that kind of signify? So that's already kind of showing that maybe we're going to have some mirroring going on or parallels going on between the two stanzas. It can be used to show balance in terms of the relationship. A lot of times it can also imply that there is a relationship, so like a speaker and another character, like an I and a you. And in fact, we do see yes, we do see a you and a your. And we also see an I. And it seems like there's no other characters. So that, again, two stanzas would seem to also reflect that immediately. Some other things going on with that. We would guess, when we think about turns, the stuff that I talk about a lot with poets is that typically you don't expect turns to be right in the middle. So I'm not going to expect the turn to occur exactly at this midpoint, because in a lot of ways that's kind of too on the nose. In fact, you can even think of like Shakespearean sonnets, right? Shakespearean sonnets, how are they operating? It's not 7-7 because sonnet's 14 lines. No, it's typically 8-6. So there's a sense of unbalance. So even though, you have stanzas operating a certain way, it doesn't necessarily mean that the turn itself, fault is going to occur right there. And in fact, I don't think it is occurring there. And my guess is it actually probably occurs right around healing. Healing your deaf. That is the moment where everything starts to shift. Let's make that bigger. I'm not too interested in today's discussion on turns, but the argument I would make for the turn is that the turn occurs. Give me a moment to adjust this. Let's grab a pen. All right, so, and again, if you're not sure what a turn is, the turn is the moment in the poem where everything subverts and we start to get some change that occurs. And for me, the turn is here. Because, you know, everything else has been talking about a lot of red. We have allusions to blood. We have allusions to the speaker doing something like I color, I finger paint. We don't have any mention. Just double checking. We don't have any mention of your until right here. It's sort of implied here with R, which is again also a bit unusual. We don't have that appearing elsewhere either. But the big thing is especially that separation. So now we don't have something that the speaker is connected with. We have something entirely different, whole new person with the yours. That's one reason why I think the turn is occurring here. Also the sense of healing. We haven't really had healing occur elsewhere in the poem either. This is also the first time that we have a line. Well, no, it's not the first time we have splashing. But aside from that, this is the first time we have a participle with healing that is also being given to the speaker, the I. Because I'm imagining it's the healing your deaf and blind broken heart, draining mind. It would seem logically based on the grammar that the speaker is the one doing the healing. Could be wrong, but just based on the grammar I'm seeing right now. Okay. The other thing, too, that would suggest that this is a turn is all of this is suddenly a reference to the heart, the broken heart, which hasn't appeared anywhere else. Everything else is we got trees, we got the red grapes, the red wines, a lot of natural image, right? The maroon roots, crimson grass, the fruits. We get lips. Okay, so we're starting to get some body parts, but we don't get heavy until we get really down here into heart. And I think that's something that you see a lot with turns as well, is that a lot of times there's hints that the turn is about to occur before the turn fully commits. And that's kind of what I see happening with the lips, so this body part here. You could even argue with the finger as well. And then with even, and also the R. The R is also foreshadowed because that's the first time we have the possession in the speaker. That's not just the single speaker, but the plural. So there's lots of little hints that a change is occurring, but then the healing your deaf and blind broken heart seems to be the full break, in my opinion. Okay, but this is supposed to be about, we're supposed to be giving an eye test, and that was way more in depth into turn analysis. So I'm going to erase all that. If you need that, again, feel free. You can just look in the replay. What else do we notice? So we talked about line lengths. I mean, we talked about stanza lengths. Let's talk about line lengths. So interesting in that, okay, last line is the same. Last line is the same. Second to last line the same. Second to last line the same. Third line, third last line the same. Third last line. So, you know, we get these like word pairs. Word pair, word pair, word pair, word pair, word pair. And then after that, we get a slight shift, right? So here we have 3 or 4 words, whereas here we only get a single. Interesting, right? Just winds. Above that, we get a real long line. And this is just, relatively long, but nothing like the line before it. And this stanza above it. So we're seeing a lot of the biggest changes happening in these first 4 lines. And then after that, we kind of settle down and there's a lot of mirroring going on. Okay, cool. So then the question from a reader's perspective is, so what does that imply if I have 2 stanzas that are almost doing the same exact thing, but one stanza is handling it different? It's a lot more unbalanced, right? You have this real long line, long, followed by this real short line. Then you have another long line, right? Again, immediately followed by a short. Whereas here, in the second stanza, much more balanced. Okay, so the second stanza is a lot more balanced. This first stanza at the opening is a bit unwieldy. Less predictable. So we're getting some tension in terms of these line lengths that are breaking from the pattern, because largely we're kind of following a consistent thing, right? Most of our lines are kind of falling into this column pretty neatly, right? The only time that's breaking is in the first stanza, because even in the second stanza, yes, the line lengths start to vary more, but this is still relatively consistent. Whereas up here, we don't really have a ton of consistency. So that's the question I would be asking myself from a writer's perspective. Again, assuming that a lot of these decisions with the line breaks are intentional. Assuming that. What does that imply if my second stanza is a little bit more balanced and orderly, whereas my opening to my first stanza is not? What sort of tension am I highlighting? What am I trying to focus on in the relationship? I know that in the first stanza, one of the things that's happening is there's no you. We have the single speaker. We have the I color. And the I still have. Whereas in the second stanza, we have the R and the your. So, and again, there's so many ways you can interpret this, but one thing that maybe this is interpreting is that the speaker in that first stanza is feeling less imbalanced, less in control than the speaker in the second stanza, where things kind of start kind of piecing themselves together in a way that feels more regular. That's just one possible interpretation. If you guys have other interpretations of what that means to you, with those differences in those opening 4 lines for each stanza, let me know what your own thoughts are on that. Okay. I think, what are some other things visually that stand out? So, probably the most noticeable thing is that movement inwards, almost like a funnel, right? Before the sudden movement out. And then we move back in. Okay. And we even get that to some degree here in the first stanza. And then again, we get the movement out. And then the movement back in. Okay. So the question, it's obviously, out of all the line breaks, this is the one that probably seems the most intentional, that wasn't necessarily impacted by formatting. And I still have not shed the last drop of. And I still have not shed the last drop of. Okay. The language is really interesting, right? We can talk about that in a moment. But so we want to kind of be asking ourselves, what does this sudden line do? And I think in the first stanza, again, we get really heavy on the nature stuff. The red leaves, the trees, the vines, the grapes, the wines, the roots, the grass, the fruits. So what does this really long line do? This is acting for me as a disruption. It's a pattern disrupt to shift the reader's focus to the speaker. And it's not just the speaker. It's almost like the speaker's like consciousness. We get kind of into their headspace a little bit, right? Because it's not even necessarily about the speaker in their blood. It's about the speaker thinking about how they are still not, like, coming to this realization. I still have not shed the last drop of my blood yet. That's not really necessarily an action. It's more just a thought. Everything else has been really descriptive. So suddenly we break from that. So that is one thing that I see kind of happening in the first stanza. And then the second stanza is also kind of similar to that. So like finger paint, our lips, rose, healing your deaf and blind broken heart, draining mine. Again, we get into deeper into kind of introspection. We're entering again how the speaker thinks and feels more. So that's something I personally see happening with that long line. And it's something that really draws a lot of attention to itself because it is so much longer than everything. So it does feel like a shift from the parts that come before it. So that is something that I think visually, if you're looking at just those long lines, those are the things that stand out to me. All right. Just one final thing. This is more like a symbolism. No, and I don't entirely know what to make of it yet because I'd probably need to sit down with it more. I thought there was some interesting kind of things going on. This is less related to the visuals and more to the poem itself. So I'll make it bigger. Okay. So I color red leaves on mahogany trees. I thought this is an interesting line because this is we're giving the speaker power. The speaker has the power to. Sorry, I was left-handed. I don't know what poner is. But power. Okay. We're giving a lot of power to the speaker because the speaker is coloring red leaves. Now, it's a little bit ambiguous in terms of the meaning. Like, does it mean that they're taking the leaves of mahogany trees that are green and coloring them red themselves? Like they have a crayon? Or is it more figurative, like they're responsible like for autumn? You know, so like I don't know if the red leaves is a symbol for autumn or is it like we're literally like coloring on the leaves. My guess would be the autumn. I color red leaves on mahogany so adorned with great. I don't entirely know what adorned is. I think it's a little. We have to always be tricky with adjectives and things because it can get a little ambiguous in terms of who they're describing. Does adorn describe the trees? Does it describe the leaves? Or potentially, it could even describe I. So I don't entirely know who's adorned with the vines of red grapes. My guess, the most logical one grammatically is the trees, just because it's the last noun that comes before the phrase. But you can make arguments for the others, I feel. But return to the idea of power. So potentially this is the speaker has the power to like to change seasons, potentially, right? Which is a lot of power. Then there's a lot of like the image with the grapes and the wines. And there's also this phrase like shed the last drop of my blood, like shed. Like, have you shed blood today? It's just not a common phrase, right? It has almost this kind of biblical kind of sense to it. And again, tied in with the grapes and the wine as well. So there's like some kind of plays with God and even like religious symbolism going on that I thought was interesting. And also like even just like mentioning, of like fruits and things like that. Like kind of like the fruit, the tree of knowledge or whatever it's called. So I thought that was interesting. And then kind of similarly too, like with the, finger paint wind. And then the words left unsaid. So it seems like there's like an issue between. And again, there's some tension there in terms of relationship, which again, if we go back to just like the book of Genesis in the Bible, I don't there's tons of things I don't know about the Bible, but there seems to be that sort of relationship, And in fact, I still have not shed the last drop of my love yet. And I'm not saying this is like necessarily like an Adam and Eve or creation poem, but I think there's some parallels in terms of the tension of the relationship where, healing your deaf and blind, broken heart, draining mind. Like there's almost like a God to first man kind of relationship going on in some ways, where the God figure, almost the speaker has a lot of power and things like that, and the you that is introduced in the poem seems to be a lot weaker in that regard. And there's a communication issue between them. And the you especially has been hurt, like healing your deaf and blind broken heart. It's not mine. It's not our broken hearts. It's your. So that kind of distancing between the speaker and the you, I think is interesting as well. And also draining. Again, if we think back to the Bible, like it's not that like God had wanted like to cast out, or God had wanted to, sever the relationship, and also there is that sense of forgiveness, because I still have not shed the last drop of my love yet. Kind of thinking about like New Testament parallels. Things about to happen, and that's also parallel to shed the last drop of my blood yet. Again, things happen in the New Testament. I don't think this is a biblical poem, but I think there's interesting parallels between things that happen in the Bible in this piece, and also the power dynamics between the you and the speaker, I think, are also very interesting. Anyways, this was supposed to be just a stream talking about looking at a poem from a distance and seeing the things you notice. And I think we got to that to some degree. If there's other things that you noticed in it looking at this piece, be sure to let me know. But I do want to, again, thank Soulmate within 222 for allowing us to dive into the piece. I'm going to head out because it's late. I'm tired. We had a long day. But again, this is fine print. This is our weekly poetry analysis show, typically at 9 p.m. New York time. Unless things come up. My name is Jeff. We will be back on Tuesday with the Verses Live. That's our weekly poetry podcast. So it'll be great to see you there too if you just want to discuss a poetry topic with us. Hope you guys have a good day, have a good night, and a good afternoon. Thank you for your time. We greatly appreciate it. I'll see you all later.